So, in the time that it took me to recover from the bearing housing fix actually working, my shifter cables have arrived. So, let's try and fit them. And here are the new cables. I've already fixed up the gearbox end. That was a pretty simple job. Just had to replace these OEM cup and ball style joints with some shiny new rod ends. And I'm a bit ashamed to admit that these are all Imperial fittings. I spec'd up some metric cables, but was informed that the lengths I'd asked for were almost identical to some off-the-shelf cables, but the off-the-shelf ones are all Imperial. But for half the price, I was prepared to go for Freedom units. To make everyone feel better, these are 1/4 inch rod ends, and that is still an M6 thread. So I machined up a little shank that's 1/4 inch and then reduced it down so I could still use a metric nut on the end. That end's all done. Time to have a look at the actual gear shifter end. And as if by magic, here is our new gear shifter mount and center console with integrated switch panel location. Started off with a big chunk of aluminium, drilled a few holes, milled out some clearance pockets, spent way too long overcomplicating a way to press out some flaps on this side to create some clearance for the gear linkage mechanism, and then welded it all together. And she's come up quite nicely. Anyway, the last job is to attach the cable outers at this end. Now, originally my plan was to just weld the mount directly to the tunnel, but I've learnt from previous experience that complicated systems like this work a lot better if you can actually assemble them. And there's no way I was going to be able to get this big ass spanner in there to do up those comically oversized nuts. So I think the best option is to make a bracket that we can bolt onto the tunnel, which allows us to do the cables up first, and then allows the whole assembly to be placed on the column and then all bolted together. So let's go and make that bracket. That's gone in there very nicely. So I want to install some captive nuts that I can drop 2 bolts through those columns down into. So I'm going to mark the first one, weld that in place, and then do the second one. So after nearly breaking my finger on the lathe trying to sand a hexagon, I decided to sandblast the zinc off those nuts. Time to weld them. So why didn't you just use riv nuts? That's a good question. As you can see, due to COVID-19, I am running very low on fasteners. On the upside, I've got a good excuse never to kiss anyone hello ever again. That's gone in there very nicely and is super strong. Now, when I said that was the last step, I sort of lied. Due to being a cheapskate and getting the off-the-shelf cables, they are slightly short. So I just need to make up some extenders for the rod ends to get them in exactly the right space. This could actually be a bit of a benefit because it means that this little pivot point back here is moved further back and has to work at less of an angle. So over to the lathe once again. So if my calculations are correct, we should have first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, and reverse. Shit, yeah. And that feels very good. Especially considering everything's only done up finger tight and this plastic housing is actually cracked through there. I still need to get a new one, but obviously didn't want to do that until I knew this whole thing was going to work. So that is a massive win, but no time for celebration yet. We need to strip it all down, paint a few bits and make a gear knob. Your knob. So there's our gear shifter and we need to make a new knob. This is the sort of the innards of the original one. It was sort of pressed onto that spline. I think it was glued there. It required some heat to remove. Having had a pressed on gear knob come off the car mid rally stage previously, I don't think I'll be using that method of attachment. And I want to try and drill and tap the end of this stick. Unfortunately, due to what's going on at the back here, I don't think I'm going to be able to get it into the lathe, and we'll have to come up with another solution. Once again, my mini mill has forced me into a bit of an odd setup. We've got the gear stick hanging off the side of the table there in a V block. And I've clamped that to the table with this right angle block. I've squared everything up to the mill, I think. I'm going to use the edge finder to get the center of the V block, and then I'll drop the edge finder down onto this bit of the shaft to find the center of the shaft. And then we should be able to drill and tap a hole in the center. That's the theory anyway. Alright, I think that'll do for this episode. Thanks for watching.